Hey everybody, Dr. Jake Hyde here, and I'm going to make a video about nutrition. So let me take a little drink here of my water, and here we go. All right, so why is nutrition such a challenging topic? It's because there's a lot of emotions attached to nutrition. It can be very dogmatic, almost religious in some ways. This is the way to eat, and they're convinced that's the best, and possibly it's the best one for them, but it's the one that really changed their life and they're kind of devoted to it. And good for you for making that change and having that health transformational experience. However, what works for some people doesn't work for everybody. And so this video is going to be, I guess, a little bit about that. So generally speaking, when patients come in and ask how should I eat, whole foods is a pretty good way to do it. So the people that went from normal Western diet to paleo, remarkable success. People went from normal Western diet to vegan, remarkable success. A lot of it is because they were eating garbage and then they started eating clean, whole foods, real foods, close to the source as possible. And that's just going to feel better, and that's going to work for 95% of people. It's just eating foods that weren't made in laboratories and factories. It does get more nuanced than that, okay? And so general advice that I give people is, here's what you really want to look at. You want to look at a couple balancing factors. You want to look at macros to an extent, so that's your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. Not that big of a deal to everybody. You want to look at pH though. You want to be balancing acidic foods versus alkaline foods because you want that balance in your body. If you go too acidic, because that's what people tend to do, is go too acidic in their diet, then your body's got to leach from other systems like bones and organs, other structures, to keep your blood at a very specific pH. If your blood varies from essentially 7.35 to 7.45 on a pH scale, you're dead. So that's why when you do lab work, we never check for pH of your blood. We know what it is if you're alive, okay? But in order to keep it that pH, your body will borrow from other systems and leach minerals, and then other systems are going to suffer because we need those minerals to buffer acids. And so you want to eat pretty alkaline versus acid. So generally speaking, what's alkaline? Plants, generally speaking, are alkaline. And then what's acidic? Well, generally speaking, sugars. Other things can be as well, grains in general. Protein to an extent. Protein's nitrogen based. When that's broken down in the body, that can become pretty acidic. Your body has to buffer that. And it's not that any of these things are bad, it's just that you want balance. Okay, so I'm looking to balance acid foods versus alkaline. And that doesn't mean that it's just because something's acid externally, like lemons, doesn't mean it's going to be acidic in the body. We're talking once the body metabolizes it, does it create alkalinity or acidity in the body? So lemons, while fairly acidic, citric acid, breaks down in the body alkaline. So that's one thing I look at. Another thing I look at is inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory. I think this one's really important considering most of the problems in our society, in Western society, or first world problems like people like to say, are inflammatory in nature. So like heart disease and strokes, cancers to some degree, and arthritides, possibly even some of the brain degeneration can be associated or attributed to some inflammatory issues. So inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory foods. How do you know which is which? That can be fairly complicated. So it's best to do the research if you really want to know. But generally speaking, your best anti-inflammatory foods are a lot of spices and herbs, and then also healthy fats like omega-3 fatty acids, which you can get in things like salmon, or you can get it in pasture-raised animals like grass-fed butter, grass-fed proteins, pasture-raised egg yolks, pretty high in omega-3s. You can get them from plants as well, which will be anti-inflammatory. So those will be it's higher in certain nuts and seeds, like flax seeds, walnuts have a higher omega-3 profile. However, that's going to be alpha lipoic acid, ALA, and What your body ultimately wants are omega-3s like DHA or EPA, which they can use more readily to make things like, the myelin sheath that protects your nerves, the cell walls in your body, brain, etc. And so you do want to get some of those, but yes, omega-3s in general, anti-inflammatory, which is good. Omega-6s, inflammatory. Where do we get omega-6s from? A lot of grains and nuts and seeds. And the biggest source that we get in our society is these refined oils like canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil, corn oil, etc. That's going to have high omega-6s, highly inflammatory. On top of that, your oxidized fats will make that worse on top of it. And so things like canola oil, high in omega-6s, and typically oxidized in the process of refining the oil. So good to stay away from those, or at least limit those. If you go to a restaurant, more likely than not, that's the type of oil they're using, is an omega-6 heavy oil, probably oxidized. So you got to live with that if that's what you're doing. And so the idea is, like, for me, don't stress about that too much if I'm eating out, but like when I'm home, really trying to control the fats that are being used. I want anti-inflammatory, highly nutritious fats like pasture-raised animal fats, your coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil. Those are going to be good. Okay, so if you can balance inflammatory with anti-inflammatory, acidity, so alkaline versus pH, you're doing pretty good. If you're eating whole foods, you're doing pretty good. It can get more nuanced. I don't mean to stress people out or freak people out, because people can be touchy about nutrition. It's very important to them. But you can start looking at nutrients versus anti-nutrients. And that's where it gets nuanced, and that's where maybe you want to work with a professional, or maybe you want to do your own research. What do I mean by nutrients versus anti-nutrients? Well, let me think of an example. So rice, for example. Okay, a lot of people eat rice. Worldwide, it's probably like the #1 carbohydrate. Now, generally speaking, people believe that brown rice is healthier, and that's because it has more nutrients in it than white rice, and has more fiber, and it has a lower glycemic index, meaning it's going to be slower to spike your blood sugar, which is a good thing. However, it has more nutrients, but it has more anti-nutrients. Okay, it's higher in lectins, which are inflammatory. It's got like 40 times the arsenic of white rice. It could be tough for someone with a fragile digestive system just to break down the rice fibers from brown rice. And so while it may be healthier on some scales, it's also harsher on the system. So white rice would scale higher for me on the nutrient to anti-nutrient, because it doesn't have a ton of nutrients, but it's a very simple, easy to deal with carbohydrate. Not a lot wrong with it, other than it can spike your blood sugar. So if you're someone who's trying to limit that, limit the insulin usage, or just the toll on your pancreas, or you're trying to lose weight, you might be tempted for brown rice, but I would just say have less rice, probably. Something simple like that. And I hope I didn't add any extra confusion. But yes, there are anti-nutrients in food. Some of that comes from agricultural processes, like what we do to our food, whether it's your plants or your animals. Some of it comes from the plants themselves. Why? Because anything living needs to have some kind of defense mechanism, or just way to ensure reproduction in the wild. And so some plants protect themselves with chemicals. And so it makes it harder for, a lot of times, just like microbes and fungus to eat it, but also maybe birds or insects. Us big mammals, we just kind of deal with it. Some mammals are better at dealing with than others, and some are better at breaking down plants into nutrients than we are. Like a cow, for example, can take a whole lot of omega-3 fatty acids out of grass and convert that nicely, where if we ate a bunch of grass, we would not a lot would happen. We're not really designed to just break that down in our digestive tract. So without making it too complicated, trying to keep it around 10 minutes, which looks like we're doing, that's a little bit of intro into how to start thinking about eating. It's just in harmony, in balance. Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Not enough of a good thing, obviously a bad thing, but you just want to create that balance and harmony. And then if you have specific health issues, then go see a health professional, and you can reach me. My contact info is on the bottom of this, or at least in the video description it should be, and someone can tailor it down, help you work with kind of the nuances of what might be best for you if you're struggling. But if you're generally healthy, you want to be healthier, eat whole foods and balance pH, toxins, and inflammatory factors. All right, bye guys.